Su currículum extenso y detallado lo tenéis en la APP y en la web.
CV you have in the website. He has a master's degree in healthcare management in the European University of Madrid. She's been at different jobs, teaching in different posts, has been deputy director of many important positions in management, human resources, supervising research and nursing in the reference hospital in the Balearic Islands, directing nursing and healthcare services. And she's not only been managing professionally, she's always also been working as a nurse in different hospital settings. And I want to highlight that her last job before being the minister was in a primary healthcare center in Mallorca. I only want to thank Patricia. I know that the circumstances now are very complicated, and devoting time and space for reflecting on these matters is something we really appreciate. We thank you, nurses. Thank you for your leadership. Coming to speak of leadership in Investen and nursing is wonderful. And I also think that the fact that you do it as a leader makes me very, very proud. Thank you, Patricia, for being here to share with us. We are now going to move on to Patricia's lecture. And I just wanted to remind you that after seeing her presentation, of the recording of her presentation, there will be time for Q&A and to speak, reflect on this. We'll have Victor and Marta helping us in the Q&A session. And with the questions and answers, raising your hand on Zoom, you can ask the questions as you wish, and Patricia will answer live. I want to thank everyone here present, and let's move on. Thank you.
Buenas tardes. En primer lugar, pues quiero agradecer.
Good afternoon. Firstly, I want to thank Maite Moreno and Rocío and Clara for their invitation to ask me to participate this afternoon, to reflect a little. So very needed in these times where time is something we don't have much of. We think that in leadership, we have very much to contribute to, we nurses. Leadership and policies and strategic decisions. Why should be leaders in this? These are questions that I ask myself and that I have some answers to that I want to share with you, especially some ideas, some concepts. For example, nurses have very much to contribute to society, very much to contribute to healthcare policy, and very much to contribute to the strategic decision-making process. So this intends to be reflections and then establishing debate, a dialogue with all of you. Although with the pandemic now, we cannot do it live, and we still have to do it in this virtual, more complex and more impersonal way. Especially, thank you for being here, for your work, for what you do every day. Nurses contribute so very much to our healthcare system. A few months ago, I showed this image in a congress that I was invited to, and I thought I would continue to use it because some people seemed to like it. I think for nurses, it's important. If you are not at the table, you are the menu. And this should give us some food for thought about how we choose our leaders, who are our leaders, who are the formal and the informal leaders. Because in the private companies, why is it that 1/3 of the companies close down after a year? Usually, this is because of a lack of leadership. We could also speak of the skills. Not many skills to highlight about leaders. I'd like to ask each and every one of you, ask each of you to tell me which is the skill you would most value: exemplarity, honesty, empathy, knowledge, humbleness, the ability to work hard, organization skills. I'm sure that together, all of us, each one of us, if we each mentioned one of those skills, we would all agree practically on everyone. But there are always some that stand out above others. After reading, reflecting on this for quite some time now, I think that a leader has to be honest, exemplary. We have to, as some say, speak of that they have to have humor, they have to be honest, they have to convey, but especially I think that a leader must be exemplary above all. And what better to analyze this moment to see how nurses here in this country and in every country worldwide are being so exemplary. From our position in the Ministry of Health of the Balearic Islands, when we started in this journey 5 years ago, we thought, what do we have to do? Which is our role in the ministry? And we thought that we could put professionals and organizations, or rather, we could put at the service of organizations and citizens healthcare excellency, an equitable, accessible system that gives an answer to the needs of the population. Many times, the healthcare professionals find it complicated because we offer or we satisfy those needs that we think that have to be covered, but not necessarily the ones that the patient requires. And more, we reflect on what people need. And that's why it's important that we are present, that we are there. Leadership is something you do and you ask for, you demand. If you remember, are not at the table, you are the menu. That is why we want to be part of the decision-making process. On the other hand, we have to take into account that authority is not something that you receive. You have to, others have to recognize it. Being authority, that moral authority is something that is recognized by others. No one will grant it to you. You are granted power, but not authority. And a good leader must aim at having authority and being able to administer the power as best as possible. In these times of pandemic, the manager and nurse of the Manacor Hospital, my friend Sol, would scold me for this image because she says that the images shown have to do with what you want to convey. In my modest presentation, I'm going to use a few images because to me, the sea is so important. We live in the Balearic Islands. We are united by the Mediterranean Sea to the peninsula. So the sea is not a separation. It's something that unites us. And the sea means a lot to me. And here, I want to stop for a moment and speak of the strategic decision-making spheres are. Care is for sure. We lead in care, in nursing, but to me, that is imprecise. I think we lead in the management of resources so that we can make it possible to have healthcare services. You lead and you care for people that work for you in organizations. We lead, as Clara does, in research, in training of the professionals. We lead also in the caring for users, the incoming and outgoing users. We lead in services, clinical areas, healthcare centers, hospitals, and then so we lead in different areas, in different spheres. We lead in spheres like primary healthcare, mental healthcare, chronicity, the fostering of health. So what is my point with these reflections of mine? I mean that our professional situation helps us lead in all these areas. And so we have to take this into account when choosing. It wouldn't make much sense if I didn't recognize this and not have excellent nurses in those strategic spheres, like the general director of public health. You must realize the importance this has in our country, Fernando Simon, or the Clara Aparicio in our region as well, Maria Antonia Fon, the general director of public health, and a nurse as well. We have to take off, we have to conquer those greater spaces, different spaces from the ones we are usually moving around in, perhaps the ones we did not have access to, but now we do. And now we must conquer that wave. We must surf the wave. We are perfectly capable of surfing the wave with the values and the skills we contribute in our profession. We are also leaders thanks to the enabling. In these presentations, I look back and although I am young, but when I look back and I remember my first times in hemodialysis where we almost had to prepare the machines by hand, I see the great technology advances, the innovation, the many things we can do with big data, the number of papers published growing exponentially in our profession, and the scientific papers as well. The amount of doctors, if you look around, looking at the people connected, how many are doctors? A doctor with a PhD in nursing or other specialties. So we have that formal recognition and should be proud of it. And we also see leaders in areas like a primary healthcare office, a basic unit, the ER room in a hospital, the intensive care unit. I think nurses are leaders thanks to our ability to work in a team. It is fundamental, and I think we know how to value. It is a very feminine profession, and we do contribute greatly in that sense when women can look around and ensure that each one of us can give our best for a common goal. Here, the sea, as I said, is fundamental. Imagine this sailboat. Before it sails off, each one has a clear idea of what they have to do. The most important thing is to set the course and where we have to go together, because if the course is deviated nearly 5 degrees, if we intend to go to, for example, the north of Catalonia, We might end up in Marseille or in Nice if we have a slight deviation from the Balearic Islands. And so I think we are used to working in teams, and we are very much aware of the fact that our interventions, whether on the patient or the team or the service or the center, with our managers, whether in one service or another, or in a research unit, in the end, the final result is that the sum of the interventions, and that is where the maths don't add up. Because in this case, 1 + 1 is much more than 2. And 2 + 2 is much more than 4, because we are capable, because you are showing more than ever how you give your best every single day. We are leaders thanks to your versatility. We always say how we have that prompt response, not just putting a tape. We are versatile because of many other things that we can do, many other skills, not just multitasking, which we can do as well. But also we have a holistic perspective of the person, of the patient. We should not forget different details. I like when they say a specialist in small details, in the care and the details in care and nursing, when you can see that human touch. There are organizations in which they convey the values of the people that run them. And that's very important, because that is how we can also convey the values of the organization. I want to reflect on the enormous amount of opportunities nurses have. I've spoken of several fields that we have access to: politics, management, research, HR management, quality, clinical practice in different spheres. Also, chronicity, we have excellent actions. We have nurses working in that area doing a wonderful task, putting themselves at the head. When we work in a home for the elderly, for example, the nurse is like the elite command, specialized nurses that give them their best to turn around what the residents are experiencing and make it all much easier. We can work in many things. What we must not do is remain stagnant. We have been stagnant for far too long, and we have to think of changing this around. I think that no one thinks that they will end up in this position. I never once imagined, when I started studying so many years ago, never once did I think that I would end up here. But we must be absolutely involved in all the chances we get, and in our work as well. When I joined after a long period of management, when I went back to the clinical practice, and I was able to, thanks to Clara or other people, I joined the research commission in primary healthcare, which is a great recognition, because they're such wonderful experts and you learn so much from them. Or when we get involved in projects, to foster health in high schools and schools, or in ICU, where technology is so very important. And we are leaders thanks to specialization. And that specialization, we recognize, I assure you that citizens and patients recognize it. And also more and more, the professionals around us recognize it as well. Who could doubt the organizational skills that nurses have. Very recently, we celebrated the 10th anniversary of Son Espacios Hospital. Right, yeah, the 10th anniversary. In 2010, it was inaugurated. I was back then in the healthcare service. And I remembered some days ago in that celebration on October the 10th, 2010, the activity began. I had the ability to thank the supervisor who back then, the supervisors that were there back then, who were really the driving forces that started it all off. Everyone participated, everyone gave it their best, but I assure you, without them, it would have been at least different, completely different. They were concerned about everything, every single detail for everything to be in place. That's the vision of the nurse. They don't miss a thing. And besides that broad vision, that broad scope, the great devotion and commitment, their empathy when putting themselves in the shoes of others, of the patients, professionals, families, of making exceptions. Sometimes I say we skip the rules. I can't say this in any of the cases, but we do skip the rules, or we can't do that, but we must be flexible. We can't be unmovable. You have to help those who work well and help those who don't work so well. Likewise, leaders in efficiency. Here we see a nurse prescribing and explaining to a patient the medication he has to have. What's the point of patients taking so many drugs if they don't know how to take them, if nobody takes them by the hand in the process? We accompany people in their vital processes, from children to the later years of age of their lives. If, for example, also in an ICU or in a hemodialysis, a room in a hospitalization area, how many times do the population thank us, the nurses, for what they do? I like to see that there was in television, I saw a program showing how the ICU works. We understand that you can't visit right now the ICU, but I like the program because every day I remember how these nurses, men and women, are working with these personal equipments that they're wearing constantly that are so uncomfortable, that make it so difficult to go about in their regular work. But they are fully aware that what they have in their hands are the lives of people, and the social recognition that they got in the program, I really appreciated, and I really enjoyed seeing this image. You're not going to die. That's why you're here. Those hopes that they have conveyed in moments and the months of March and April in Spain, and that you're doing as well nowadays, every day, these days in which the pandemic is worsening all over the world, but nurses are always there. So it's very important to recognize what they're doing. And I'm aware that people are tired, the professionals are tired, that probably from the administrations we cannot offer all the recognitions that we believe they deserve, that we should offer these professionals. I know you don't thank enough. And I also would like to
And I would ask you
ask you
especially,
for your proposal.
tell us, what do you think we can do from the administrations? What do you think is the best way in which we can open up the way? And most especially to have this recognition that seems to be demanded more and more, because of course, politicians and managers, those of us in politics, sometimes are not really, well, we're not at the kind of height, or we don't have the means, or for different reasons, we cannot do as much as we would like to. So there have to be, well, spaces to share where we can actually listen. And regarding the pandemic, what I like to say is, well, we have to do things based on evidence, but that means we have to listen a lot and speak less. So what a pity not to be able to be with you physically, because I'm sure I would speak much less and listen to you much more. So who can doubt nowadays that we are leaders in research? We are, and well, we have been right now, and because unfortunately, because of the pandemic, it's been impossible to carry out all the social visualization that you all deserve and that the profession deserves worldwide. So indeed, next year, well, we hope that we can continue showing to the world what it is that we can contribute as a professional group, always from the basis of deep knowledge of our profession, of nursing care, and from the different spheres of specialty, not only because of the law of cohesion and quality that was passed in Spain, and which is a legal framework that demands from us that we are always training, but rather because of the need that we have as a profession to learn, to know what is going on with our clinical practice, with our management, with our even our political practice in a way. We have to assess, we have to question all the time. We have to know what are we doing, why are we doing, and why part of the care or part of the practical side can be more effective than others. I don't know, small question marks. In my case, when I had the chance to manage Department of Training and Research for quite a few years, by the way, I used to think, well, this is just a bit of research. It's a modest, humble research, yeah, and that's what I used to say. Listen, there are no small researches. There's good or bad research, but there's no small or humble research, not at all. If you have a research question and you do research on the basis of it, it's just as important as anything else. And now more than any other moment, at least compared to times I've lived, we are all the time questioning what we do, because this virus, yeah, SARS-CoV-2, is really making things difficult for us. It's really meaning that we're not doing well. And truly, being aggressive, going, doing what we can. There are moments in which, if it were not thanks to all researchers and thanks to the great research that is being done on COVID-19, well, it would be really impossible to make headway right now, impossible to move forward. So I think that we have to be able to see this and to recognize the role of research, of nursing research, much more. Then, as to leaders in humanization, this is a photograph which I particularly liked, because there's an initiative going on in the Inca Hospital in Majorca, where we have Soledad Gallardo. And well, I really loved this image. They decided to start this special scheme that they've called Walking to Health. And listen, if somebody is confined, in a lockdown at home, or even if you don't have a lockdown, but now we're being told not to kind of go out too much, and we're dying to go out, aren't we? Well, just think of all these patients that have been weeks and weeks in intensive care. Just imagine that moment. I mean, it's so difficult, isn't it? It's so practically impossible. And that's why I loved the scheme. It was the first time they took this patient outdoors to see the view. And for this person, it must have been a super special moment. And why? Why did this happen? Well, thanks to a group of nurses who suggested that activity to make sure that those patients that had stayed for weeks in hospital went outdoors for a while when they couldn't even walk. So this really is human. It's wonderful. Then as well, closing now the chapter of leadership. Well, just let me say that we all like to be surrounded by very positive people. It's much easier to do things when in your working environment you have people who are happy, because if you have people who are always complaining, who arrive late every day, who use just any excuse not to work. I mean, I always tell my staff, listen, don't give me any excuses. If you're late, you're late. Just say you're sorry, but don't explain to me whatever has happened. You know, that the dog you got lost or that you tripped on something. Don't tell me. But at the end of the day, I think we have to be fully aware of what our responsibility is. To be positive is another quality I'm sure that we really value, because we value it in everyone. Yes, in friends and colleagues. Positive people attract other people to themselves. And now more than ever, we have to make sure that this positive side is catching for the people surrounding us. And we have to make sure that we get our teams to be positive too. We should be aware of the whole load of opportunities that this profession is offering us all the time. I mean, nursing is just a great profession. So we must always be open to opportunities. No complaints, better be positive. Look at what can be done and look for what is new. Especially, we shouldn't ever do things just on the basis that they've always been done this way forever, but try change. Now, coming to the end of these, well, and to going to the last 5 or 10 minutes of my presentation, well, I'm going to tell you about something that I'm sure fascinates you all, a totally recognized sphere, which is politics. No, I'm joking. I'm joking, of course. But listen, do allow me, please allow me. Slight digression. Politics. At the end, at the beginning, and at all times. Well, politics moves societies. Politics is the cogs in the wheel, and in this sense, politics moves groups of people and makes things happen. It is true that politics right now are criticized everywhere. I don't think we've ever had such terrible levels of credibility that is politicians. Yes, I mean, people are really fed up of politicians, and I'm so sorry about this. I'm very sorry. And I apologize time and time again for not being or not meeting expectations. It seems that we are not meeting the expectations of the citizens. Definitely, we need more. We have to work on agreements, reaching agreements and knowing how to listen. But we must also put forward sensible proposals and positive programs. And we have to make sure that political parties can work together and do so to meet the expectations of citizens. I hope I'm explaining myself clearly, because it's not really to say, listen, I'm not following the interests of my party, only the interests of society. No, that's not good enough. I mean, you belong to a political party, so that obviously that means that you have certain beliefs. And that yes, indeed, should be a goal for politics, and in this case, for health policy too. I mean, I was telling you before, in our case, from health management, we demand professionals to work on the basis of scientific evidence. So health managers must also incorporate in their everyday practice, that is, in the decisions that they take day in and day out, they have to incorporate the different spheres of management. And it's very clear that we as politicians have to require this so that the population benefits from the performance. And I will say it can be done, but when there is good political action based on political evidence in this case, it's easier to make good decisions because as well, when you make a decision, you have to think mid and long term. And that's why in my presentations, I always refer to the importance of you all becoming involved in politics. Please do, please do. I know it's very difficult. I know common garden people hate it, but really you should become involved in politics because that's where decisions are made. When a political party has a program, a specific program, well, those are the first decisions being made about what will be the different axes for the coming 4 years of the work of this political party. And that's why it's so crucial that one participates as a citizen. You have to be politically active, please. It's important that you all become involved. And I know that especially health professionals find this type of involvement difficult, but then we complain that in decision-making spheres, there are no health professionals. But of course, there won't be if you don't become involved, first of all, at grassroots levels. So please, please do be politically active. I have a remark as well of Daniel Inirarity. I am referring to this well-known intellectual. He said, he says in some writings that the radical transformation of politics cannot limit itself to administering stagnation. There's a treble complexity. You have a growing number of actors and actresses participating in decisions, then different logics and different synchronicities. One has to mobilize knowledge too in order to make the right decisions. The slide is nurses in politics. Why not? Or why? When people say to me, it's so difficult, why should I become involved? Why do you want me to participate in politics? I always say, well, why not? Why not? Why not? It's really, well, I don't know. There's nothing against it. Yeah? I mean, well, you can. Go ahead. It's the first place in which decisions, strategic decisions are being made, and one should be there. So I do think it's really important that we show the population what we are able to contribute. And for that, well, nurses, you nurses, us nurses, I mean, we've talked about all the spheres in which you are leading or you can become leaders. So you have to be in politics too. You have to make nursing visible in politics because we must have a vision that goes beyond the little bits of society that we deal with, and we have to see the whole population everywhere. So in this slide, it's get a nurse in your life and your health will improve. And this is just, well, coming to the end of my presentation. I want to give public thanks. Well, recently, I started using Twitter and I started using this sentence. Yes, place a nurse in your life and you'll see your health improving. Let me go back a bit to that moment in which I was telling you that I was so fortunate that I spent 4 years as a nurse in a primary care center, and I was fortunate in that I had pediatrics and adults both. So it was a super fantastic chance to analyze many interests. I was able to learn a lot, both from adults and children. And the patients, well, and citizens, not always patients, but just, wherever we may be with our activity, we can identify what's going on. It's important that we as nurses are carrying out community activities. It's important that we train, that we go into depth in certain subjects. And because of this, I've realized that as I entered into things in depth and I could contribute something, just a small grain of sand, to that person that wanted to, for example, lose weight. And so then, well, things that I gave advice that I find difficult to follow. But anyway, so important in what I'm saying. This happens, yeah, but it's essential to have credibility, because that is part of what makes you, what makes people listen to you. to be able to advise, to accompany. And at the beginning, I mean, I came from a hospital environment. Yes, I spent, well, most of my professional years were spent in different hospitals, but especially working on management. And then in this primary care center, I realized how rich our profession, our nursing profession is, yeah? How much it is that we can give to people. And more than one patient has said to me that thanks to that piece of advice coming from a nurse, or thanks to an explanation, or I don't know, a diabetic person, for example, well, thanks to somebody making sure that everything is okay and making sure that they've learned what they had to in order to adapt to the new situation, in the case of a chronic disease, for example, or in the case of a young teenager in secondary education in the special office where there's a nurse. I love to do that activity, listening the worries and concerns of teenagers. And when you see that the population at whole is so grateful with so little coming from us, well, it makes you want to do much more. And now as a politician, I think it's my duty to convey every day, if possible, every moment in my presentations, to make sure I convey the message that all professionals are very important, that we are working in an interdisciplinary manner, not multidisciplinary, but interdisciplinary, yes, all with each other. And increasingly, and now, well, okay, in this pandemic, maybe, well, work has to continue the way it is, but also social workers, social educators, sociologists, yes, statisticians, mathematicians, computer science guys. I mean, we want to work in these interdisciplinary teams. It's essential that we do. But honestly, and I'm telling you from the heart, I think that really, I believe that those people who place a nurse in their lives will always gain better health in whatever sphere. Okay, I mean, never mind if it's hospital, primary, wherever, even family care. It's so important, and so necessary right now in times in which it's also difficult. So my thanks go to all these excellent nurses. Thank you for great competencies. It's so important that nurses help us all to better live this disruptive situation everywhere. So, and now coming to the end of my presentation, well, please, let us make sure that we convey this message to our teams and the population. Put a nurse in your life and you'll see how your health improves. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone, for listening to me. Thank you for giving me this precious time that we shared. And now, yes, I'm available for any questions you might have in the discussion session. Thank you.
Pues, sí. Muchísimas gracias, Patricia.
Thank you, Patricia. Thank you for your words. Thank you for sharing your ideas with us. Thank you for your enthusiasm, because truly you convey such energy and enthusiasm. It's really contagious, and I'm sure that more than one of us now feels positively infected by your enthusiasm. I think that you've really contributed a lot, a lot. You have opened our eyes to a number of things that we knew about, but when somebody tells us, they are made more patent, more visible. That is that nurses are leading in many, many spheres and disciplines. They are leading care. They are leading as well in other facets, not only care. Thank you, Patricia, as well, for having placed the health of the citizens in the Balearic Islands in the hands of so many managing nurses. That's fantastic. I know that you've done that. Part of your team is made up of nurses, and that's great, a great election. And I do think you are getting very good figures in the management of the services, the health services, and in the development and performance of the projects that you're working on. That truly is an important change happening in the Balearic Islands. So thank you, really. Thank you for having been with us. Well, we're going to go on now to questions. Questions coming from participants. You know that you can ask the questions through the questions and answers chat, or by raising your hand on the screen. We have Marta and Victor. I'm going to give the floor to Victor. There might be some question. Hi, good afternoon. Yes, indeed. We've got Eva Bat who raised her hand with a question, so I'll give Eva Bat the floor so she can talk.
Hola. ¿Qué tal?
Hi.
La verdad es que lo había escrito también ahí, en el apartado de preguntas, así que no
Truth be told, I wrote it as well in questions and answers. Congratulations, Patricia. Thank you very much. I think that you've explained yourself really well. You've told us why it is so important that we are there in each and every one of the moments and steps to leadership. But I love the metaphor, right? I mean, you're so straightforward. So I wanted to give the metaphor back to you in the sense that, I mean, we have to make sure that we are put in positions of relevance as well, because at times we're rather limited, and we have to make sure that we are there as a true professional group. So what to do to become leaders? It's not so easy. I mean, what to do? How do we achieve this value? Thank you, Eva. Thank you. Allow me to say thank you to Clara as well for being the moderator in this session, and thank you for having invited me, and thank you for being so stoic. I've been speaking for 40 minutes. It's been a monologue. I really, really wanted to get to the Q&A session. That's what I like best. Listen, to be there, to be visible, you have to be there, but you have to know how to be there, yeah? And you have to want to be there. That's very important, because it is true that in our profession, well, very female, right? A very female profession. There are moments when at different stages of life, we have different interests, and work isn't always a priority or even the possibility. I mean, at times we don't have the possibility to dedicate the huge number of hours necessary or that we are demanded to give. And sometimes we don't prioritize. I think it's important to start being there, yes, and to be simply open. Why do we have more nurses in decision-making posts in the Balearic Islands? Well, because probably I know more nurses than other health professionals. And as I know the value of these nurses, I don't doubt. And I appoint them. Recently, we appointed a human resources subdirector in the health service. She had never well, this position had never been taken by a nurse. But listen, who manages the greatest volume of people in a hospital in primary care? It's always nurses. So listen, let's take advantage of all this huge intrinsic knowledge of the profession. I mean, there are so many people who year in and year out are always proving how much they know and how well they work. Maybe in other regions it's more complicated because they don't have structures that support this. And I have to say as well, increasingly, the recognition of nurses is growing all the time. I mean, the politicians are increasingly, more in awe of the nursing profession, and they are recognizing the values. So we have to, give steps forward, yeah? When we are given important challenges, sometimes we might feel lazy, but because it means, of course, personal commitment, but you have to say yes. And we have to make sure that we train as much as we can, because we have to go forward, and you have to try not to be weak, yeah? That's hard, but we know how to be there and make the effort. Victor, any other? For the time being, no one else raising the hand on the screen. Okay, Marta, I do think there are questions in the question and answer chat. Yes, we have quite a few. The first one from Azucena Pedraz, asking for the role of nurses in leadership of coordination, the coordination of social and health professionals in order to meet the needs of chronic patients in community medicine. She adds that specialization in family and community nursing should be useful to lead that coordination between levels. Should I answer? Yes, please do. Well, thank you. Yes, of course, of course. It is true that nurses are experts in coordinating different spheres and different professionals. So here, for example, let me tell you, in 2015, we had 2 case managing nurses. Now we have more than 60 at all different levels of care. And that's a clear sample of the need there is to coordinate care. But then you have to coordinate many other things. And I think that right now, for example, as regards material resources in the management of the pandemic, well, it's been very much focused on nursing professionals. And that is, we shouldn't only think about care, because, I mean, you do it really well. We have to open other spheres and other fields, as I said. Take challenges, for example, human resources in healthcare services. That would give you a different vision, a different standpoint to the people working now only in nursing. And specialist nurses, those who specialize in family nursing care, then we have huge challenges. It's so important to define the specific role of each one of these specialist professionals, because we are actually fitting specialist nurses sometimes to do the same things as other more generalist nurses. We have to be more creative and establish a good difference between the roles. Because, well, now all this that we've done has been selected through personal interviews and really with a great level of detail. And there are specialist nurses in posts, decision-making posts. I think it's yet another place to be. And then as regards community care, well, yes, of course, it's so important, even more so now with the pandemic. And it's what I was saying, it's not sufficient to have the measures we have if these are deployed without offering good support for the deployment, because of course you have to make sure that these measures happen. It's very easy to say, okay, quarantine, lockdown, I don't know, people stay at home. That's all very well. But if that person has to go shopping, or if that person doesn't have food, or needs the money and has to go to work or whatever, even if it's for a very meager wage, well, I think there's a huge coordination role to come from the social services there. We as nurses should take a step back, but coordinate all that community intervention, yes? And I mean, the public health general directorate has to do that, collaborating with the social services representatives. And I guess this is what it is, coordination.
Pasamos a la siguiente.
Sí.
We go to the next question. Jesus Bujalance says that you are a nurse politician, and that's always surprising. He asks, in the world of politics, is it difficult to do something being a nurse? Do you feel more a nurse or a politician? Well, thank you, Jesus, for the question. Well, I don't know what to say. I feel as a colleague, as your colleague, a nurse that right now has a position of responsibility that's a bit different, but not more demanding than any other job of any nurse in everyday work. I mean, you know, what we're seeing in intensive care, for example, I was seeing just now a documentary and of a nurse who had, you know, just couldn't take the heat because of all the personal protection. I mean, all of us, we're all working, trying to contribute from our personal positions. So listen, I have to organize. If I had to give you a hierarchy, I'd say I'm a nurse, always a nurse. But tomorrow I have a session at Parliament. And, well, yes, I tend to define myself as a feminist nurse woman. And tomorrow, speaking in the Parliament, I will indeed make this relevant. Well, as to politics, well, it's like management. You might like it more or less. You might like politics more or less. You might decide to have a greater or lesser influence. But I like management a lot. I'm passionate about management. Politics, well, that's more complex, really quite difficult right now. It's different. It's got more layers. It's more difficult to have recognition. Decision making is on the basis of consensus is hard, because frankly, politics is delicate. And also, we as politicians tend to be assessed and criticized on the basis of everything, gestures, movements. We're not perfect. We people, we have times of weakness, times of uncertainty, times in which we doubt. And well, I think I'm a nurse. I'm a nurse who would like to implement health policy based on evidence. I'd like to use evidence for the health policies to be deployed mid or long term and to be able to finally leave a better health system than the one I encountered when I arrived.
Muchas gracias, Marta. Otra
Thank you, Marta.
Susana pregunta. que la
This is a
profesión
question.
enfermera sea eminentemente
The
femenina,
fact
tiene
that
algo que ver con
nursing
esa presión
is run
social
basically
política y en las
by
decisiones.
women, does it have to do with the political situation and decisions?
No acabo de entender la pregunta.
I don't really understand the question. I mean, the fact that there are more women in our profession, I don't think so. There are more and more women everywhere in all professions because in universities and the most technological degrees that seem to be forbidden for women, we see more and more women engineers. But if we look at other spheres, we look at ours, of course. But if we look at fields like the legal field, there are women judges. There are more and more. Or women pilots or engineers or telco engineers. We see more and more because socially we have also adapted and evolved and recognized the role of women, the value of women. I don't know. There have been many comments made in this sense. Also, I think it's my opinion, no scientific evidence, but sometimes I've seen debates between, I don't know, recent elections when you see two male contestants, they behave in a certain stereotypical way. And many times, as we've heard, many men said, even if it were two women and not two men, probably the outcome would have been very different. This happens frequently. We don't have that aggressive nature. Perhaps it's a cultural matter. And of course, we cannot generalize, but we must not adapt masculine roles. We are women and we should not adopt masculine behaviors just to aim at a post. No. We, in any case, are seeing greater presence of women in all fields.
Muy bien, muchísimas gracias, Víctor. Creo que hay alguna mano
So thank you
levantada,
very
¿verdad?
much. I believe there are some hands raised. Victor? Yes, there's a question that I'm going to give the floor to.
Hola, ¿se me oye?
Hello, can you hear me?
Sí, sí, perfectamente.
Very well, yes. I wanted to firstly thank you, Patricia, and I wanted to ask, I am a young nurse. I'm 26 years old. I'm in the world of research. I'm passionate about it. About moving to politics, I would love to, but I have no idea about politics. It's not like another thing like research, teaching, or other things that come as a given, but in politics, you're on your own. Maybe you think I'm ignorant, but I don't know. Any advice for young nurses on how to start moving around in the world of politics? Thank you very much. Wish I were your age. been considered to be great politicians. They're of a certain age, maybe you don't even know them due to your young age, but if they were now subject to Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and the social media, and each of the words you say out of context, movement, would they be considered such great politicians? Hard to believe. Hard to believe. We politicians currently are not wonderful, no, but we are subject to great pressures. And your question, I think it's very interesting, very pertinent. All political parties in general, great political parties and small ones as well, that I can think of, they have healthcare groups in the party. So it's a matter of approaching them, approaching the party that you feel keen to, and ask, is there a healthcare group in this region? And start participating there. I don't know. You don't have to be a member of the party to do that. You just have to be there, listen, attend the meetings, listen to how they establish their political programs. I think the programs are there to follow. And from 2015 to 2019, our level of compliance is over 90%. What we said we would do in 2015 and what we've implemented has achieved a 90% compliance. And that is really important because that's the reality. It's the course we are following in our sailboat. And that is something you start working in those healthcare groups and the political parties, and start preparing projects, proposals, possible draft bills to the parliament. And that is simple, but quite unknown, yes. But let's see if we have more of you, so we have more nurses taking part. Victor, I believe you wanted to ask something. Yes. With your permission, I wanted to ask Patricia a question. Well, first of all, congratulations on your presentation, which I found most interesting. I'm Victor Gonzalez. I'm a nurse. I'm a professor at University in Castellón. About Claudia's question and what you said at the beginning, how we have to be trained. Claudia was asking how to begin. I don't know what to do. Could you tell us what you think about this all? Can you hear me? I lost you for a second. Yes. Yes. What do you think about training in the university, working on leadership and political skills? In the Balearic Islands, I believe you have a group working strongly in this field. What things do you think could be done or improved? Thank you, Victor. I think it's true. We don't speak too much about politics. And perhaps in management, in the School of Nursing, they could cover it a little more broadly. The further away from the practice, the more difficult it is that your decisions have an influence on the final result of the health of people. I am not at the top. I am very far. And I do think it's important to start motivating, to start with nurses who have those ideas, for them to know that these things exist. Take a look at them from the universities. Each one has to approach the political party that they feel closer to, because whatever you want to do, defend public health or private health, wherever you find yourself more comfortable, politically speaking, and then offer information. I think that the most regions most large cities or in maybe smaller municipalities, they might have those health groups and you could speak more there, or also the influence from the world of politics. It's infrequent, that's true. Frequent that nurses are interested in politics at age 25. I've not seen that very frequently, I have to say. It's either a person who is part of a political party or belong to that party since recently, and little by little start moving in. And there are many more people like myself. There are members of parliament, in the regional parliaments, there are nurses, and it's not just me, there are many others. Maybe you could also come in, get in touch with these people and ask them how they manage to participate in the decisions taken.
Víctor, ¿tenemos alguna otra pregunta?
Any other questions, Victor? No, that's it for the time being. Thank you, Patricia, so much. Thank you all.
Marta, creo que en el chat de preguntas sí.
Marta, I do believe we have questions in the chat box. Yes, María José González says, don't you think leadership and visibility of nursing to have us something to say in the decision-making process requires a common strategy and not leaving it to the individual? Yes, no doubt. In 2007, I was running care services in the healthcare services because Pepomar trusted in me and they created that management post for me. If I'm not mistaken, back then in management, I believe maybe it was one of the first posts as such. I think it's important that the structures of healthcare services and should have nurses. It's important that we know how to convey the value that we contribute to in teams. Here we are fighting tooth and nail, and I'm saying this as with sorrow and with self-criticism. We have only one nurse running a center, a large center, but with some interferences. But a person who is still wonderful, leading a center and who was appointed by the center itself, by doctors and nurses and the administrative staff. They chose that person as the optimal person to run that center. I think it's very important to conquer spaces. It's not a matter of fighting, but conquering spaces, and if we have the right training, we can do that. Clara Vidal is moderating, supporting with methodology and research in many groups and many professionals for a long time now. And thanks to that work, there's research coming out that is excellent. It's wonderful. But people have to be aware of the fact that in the Balearic Islands, no one thinks she's a nurse. Everyone knows she's a nurse, but no one is questioning that person, because authority is something you earn. You are given power and authority you earn, and that knowledge is what spreads out, what makes us continue making headway.
Gracias, Patricia. Sabemos que tienes que
Thank you,
incorporarte.
Patricia. We know you have another appointment at 5:30. Maybe we can have two more questions. Do you think you have time for two more questions? Yes. There's a very interesting congress on oncological patients. I wasn't able to attend last year, and there are over 300 people that have registered. And yes, I have a few more minutes. Okay, Marta. A few more questions? José Manuel Gómez speaks of the recognition of clinical professionals at times of pandemics. We have to go beyond money. If nurses can organize a ICUB suddenly, why are they usually left out of the regular organization services? How to overcome that? Convincing. It's a complicated role. Not everyone is so permeable. There are people who have their prejudices. And if on a day-to-day basis, with this pandemic, we can see it more than ever. No one can question the leadership, the ability to organize and manage resources. I always say, like, this nurse running a huge center, she's not going to run the clinical or pharmaceutical departments of the center, but she can run the team of professionals to achieve common goals, having the area coordinators side to side. I think that taking steps forward, and you might say, I have to struggle with a chief of service, my director, my manager, that don't take us into account. But we have to use evidence more than custom. We have to stop complaining because we're not there, and we have to prove that we can offer responsible projects. And how the right intervention can generate economic savings. Also be present in the, or be concerned about the hospital indicators, the most frequent ones. I've had groups of supervisors that said the mortality rate of the service is not something I'm concerned with. Oh, but no, it does. And the readmittance rate, if we prove regularly that, and as we are proving, and you are proving, that's when recognition appears. I said that before. We have we have many male nurses, but I've seen 2 resolutions of residences. I thought at the beginning in residence. Now I really trust, because in this case, for example, I've seen that every time they intervene in a home for the elderly, we manage to turn around the situation. And we have one of the lowest mortality rates in Spain. Those are the results. We'll still be nurses, and are doing an excellent job also. Patricia, I have a question. The leadership of nurses at a European or international level, we are seeing here leadership. We have a Nursing Now campaign and different initiatives. How do you see this internationally and European? There are countries like Canada with years of social recognition of nurses, so they can have ministers of health who are nurses, or many other Anglo-Saxon countries that can have that, because in the end, it's not just the profession, it's what you carry with you, what you've been able to learn and adapt to the trajectory. Internationally, the campaign was good. Unfortunately, the year has been strange, and we have not been able to make visible what we did with Nursing Now. Hopefully in 2021, we will have more opportunities to work in that sense. But when I see how some people work, you see the ability of some working 24/7, connecting with everyone. We need many people like that. And we need to take steps in the WHO and the United Nations. We need to be part of international bodies that are perhaps more difficult to access, or maybe we've not even considered to do that. I haven't thought that I would like to work in the WHO, but maybe I wish that many nurses hearing us wish to work in the WHO and manage to do so, if they wish to. Yes, because maybe we identify European leading nurses, but few Spanish nurses are known worldwide in that sense. So perhaps we should aim higher. Perhaps we should, yes. Very well, then. I think we can have one more question and we will let her move on to her next Congress. Marta, any other questions? Yes. Blanca Fernandez Lasqueti wants to ask about nursing now, the campaign. Do you think it's helped nurses regardless of COVID? Do politicians that are not nurses perceive the importance of this World Campaign? I've been so involved in the management of the pandemic that I've been very narrow-minded. We have had 9 very intense months and 24/7 for these 9 months is sometimes won't let you see the whole picture. I think the pandemic, on the one hand, has been an exceptional moment in which to prove the role of nurses. And on the other hand, not so much having to do with the campaign that's been affected by the pandemic, because we were not able to celebrate the live events we wanted to celebrate in the campaign. I had several trips I should have taken to different regions, which were canceled, unfortunately, but through the media and Investen and Maite and the enthusiasm of moving on and organizing, I think that for sure the meetings will be fruitful, but never the same as in person. But still, there's a huge effort of everyone participating in the campaign, and it is moving. We see it and we hear it. And I would say, I think so. I think they do perceive it. Politicians, ministers, I can't tell you exactly, but I will ask in the next meeting to see if they are aware about this campaign. I promise I will ask. At least in one of my WhatsApp groups, I will ask. Patricia, there are so many questions waiting for an answer, many questions in the chat box. We will send them to you because I think it's worthwhile to continue with the debate. It's a shame we have to leave it here, but I believe you have convinced us and created enthusiasm. I want to thank you on behalf of Investen and all the participants for your participation. We know how busy you are. And personally, my thanks as well for your management, for your work. I think you are an example in other regions and for many nurses, as I see in today's chat. I want to thank you again, and no, thank you. But I am sure that those coming now and in the future will be even better I've been delighted when there are people from so many regions. I want to say that you have to take more advantage of me. I'm accessible. You have my personal phone, and I've had it for years and years. You have my email. You can contact me as you wish. Here we are. If you think I can help in any way, if I can influence in any decision, sometimes you might say, this is not working. If I can help, count on me. Thank you for your interest and for giving me the chance to speak of something else besides the pandemic. Thank you so much. Greetings to you all. I think we should applaud.
Pues sí, muchísimas gracias, Patricia. Muchas gracias.
Yes, thank you so much, Patricia. Thank you.
Maite, ¿tienes que hablar tú ahora?
Maite, yes, we have a break.
Bueno, me gustaría bueno, no sé si se me ve fatal ahora a mí, pero bueno, ya me oís.
You can hear me, right? We have a break.
El salón social, por si lo queréis,
We have the social room, and
dentro de media hora vamos bien de tiempo, o sea que dentro de
in
media hora
half an hour,
podrá ir a su mesa.
we can meet again. You can attend the different rooms,
Os puede gustar. Muchas
so you can connect in half an hour to the room you want to.
gracias. Os he mandado un mensaje a todos por vuestro esfuerzo y por vuestra comprensión. Y
Thank
nada,
you
pues
for
estamos
your
aquí.
understanding.
Nos quedan
And
4 maravillosos días, 4:30 maravillosos.
here we are with 4.5 more days to go. See you in a little while.
Gracias, Maite.
Thank you, Maite.